There. Okay, so getting everyone in, we have a question in the chat, which is what town you're from and what project or ideas or questions that you might have around funding for historic preservation. Just kind of interested to see who's in the room. And with that, we can sort of get started. So hello, everyone. I'm Lindsay Randall, and today the Metropolitan Area Planning Council, the Massachusetts Historic Commission, and Preservation Massachusetts are all excited to welcome all of you to the Eastern Massachusetts Historical Commission Coalition, EMHCC, our meeting, which is funding history and heritage projects. Preservation work is deeply rooted in community and history, and it's also about securing the resources needed to bring these efforts to life. And today we're here to discuss key funding opportunities available for heritage preservation projects that can help protect and sustain our shared history. Now, we have some fantastic speakers with us today who will provide an overview of various funding programs and how they can be utilized to support your projects. We have Jennifer Doherty from the Massachusetts Historical Commission, who will cover survey and planning grants and the Massachusetts Preservation Projects Fund, two vital sources of funding for historic preservation across the state. Elizabeth O'Connell from the State Archives will discuss the State Historical Records Advisory Board, or SHRAB, programs, including the Veterans Heritage Grant, which helps preserve the stories and records of those who have served our nation. Eleni Veritimos and Geetha Ramani from MassDevelopment will present on the Underutilized Properties program, as well as other programs, sharing examples of how these can breathe new life into historic properties and underutilized spaces, among other things. And Norman Abbott and Gloria Wangpu from Metropolitan Area Planning Council will provide an overview of District Local Technical Assistance, or DLTA, and the Grant Assistance Program GAP, highlighting how these resources can strengthen your local preservation efforts and enhance your competitive grant applications. During our presentations, if you have comments or questions, please put them in the chat. And at the end of all four presentations, we will have time for Q&A. And yes, the meeting and presentations are being recorded and will be posted to the MAPC YouTube page, as well as to the EMHCC page on the MAPC website. Do you enjoy all of our acronyms today? And so thank you for being here, and let's dive into how we can fund the future of our preservation in our communities. I will turn it over to Jen to kick us off.
Thank you, Lindsay. There we go. So my name is Jen Doherty. I think most of you will know me at this point, but I am the local government programs coordinator at the Massachusetts Historical Commission. I'm here as a resource for any local government folks who support historic district commissions as a sort of point of contact at the MHC. As Lindsay said, I'm going to be talking about our two main grant programs today, survey and planning grants and the Massachusetts Preservation Projects Fund. So survey and planning grants, or S&P grants, are for survey and planning projects. They are most commonly used to update a community's historic resources inventory. So your inventory forms, if you're familiar with those. But they're also used for things like community-wide preservation plans, National Register of Historic Places nominations, and design guidelines for local historic districts. And this year we are in our grant cycle already, but our FY25 priorities are going to be funding planning projects and National Register of Historic Places nominations. The grants are a 50% reimbursable matching grant. So you do have to expend the full cost of the grant, and we will reimburse you 50%. We used to say, because these are federal funding, the cycle is a little off from the municipal funding cycle. So we used to say you didn't need a match in hand when you applied. However, these have become more competitive in recent years, so we do strongly encourage folks to have a match in hand when they apply if possible. It makes for a stronger application. They are federal funding from the MHC's historic preservation allocation. So you cannot match them with federal funds except for CDBG funds. So common matches include a straight local appropriation, some private trusts, and also support from other local organizations like the Historical Society. And we do occasionally allow for an in-kind time match, but this is really only if you have dedicated historic preservation staff, which limits it to about 10 communities across the state. So this was last year's, or I guess 2 years ago, awardees. So you can see that most of the projects are survey projects with some plans in there, community-wide preservation plans, a landscape plan, and a survey plan. For those numbers on the right, that is the amount that we're awarding in the grant. So you can double that to get the total project cost. The minimum cost for survey projects is $25,000 total project cost. However, due to a shortage of consultants in recent years, we've seen survey costs increase. So $30,000 to $40,000 total project cost is more competitive now. And you'll see that's really what we're using as kind of the base number for survey work. Community-wide preservation plans are around the same, $30,000 to $40,000. We did have a community go up to $50,000 recently. And then National Register nominations, those really kind of depend on the property or the resource that's going to be listed, because those can really vary greatly from, an individual 18th century building to a downtown, commercial district. So here's a timeline of how the survey and planning grant process plays out. It is not a quick process. So if you have an immediate need, survey and planning grants may not be the funding source for you. But as I said, we are currently accepting letters of intent. Those are due about a month from now, in mid-November. We'll invite folks in for a full application at our December commission meeting. Those full applications are due in early February, and we select projects at our March commission meeting. Procurement will occur over the summer, so summer of 2025. And then projects proceed from the fall of 2025 through to ideally finishing up June 30th of 2026. So again, not a quick process, but that's, to give enough time for all the work to proceed. And I will note, I know some communities do have an existing relationship with a consultant if you've been doing survey for many years, which is certainly great. We can certainly send the RFQ to them. But for these grants, you cannot pre-select a consultant. If you put a consultant's name in your application, you will automatically be disqualified. So you cannot pre-select a consultant. We also cannot pay for work that has already happened. This is only for future work. We can't reimburse for work that has already occurred. So to wrap up the S&P part, always talk to MHC staff about your project before you apply. We can help guide you on, what you're looking to do, the cost of the project. We also have a pretty standard scope that we use for most projects. So when you get to the full application piece that does require submitting a scope, you can just submit our standard scope. You don't need to spend a lot of time rewriting one. You do want to think about what you're going to survey if you're doing a survey project, really having a good idea of a specific area or even developing a target list of properties. And then if you're looking for a National Register of Historic Places nomination in the SMP program, you do really want to get started with us earlier, a few months before you submit an application. And that's because those require a few different prerequisites. First, we must have issued a determination of eligibility for the property or the district before you apply. We can't really award grants for an NR nomination without that. And then if you're looking to nominate a district, we want to have a really good sense of the boundaries and then some sort of demonstration of owner support. National Register districts do require owner consent, or at least not owner objection. So we want to have a good idea that the project is going to move forward to completion if we are going to fund it. So turning to our next program, the Massachusetts Preservation Projects Fund. These are more specific for doing physical work on individual buildings. So MPPF is available for State Register of Historic Places listed structures that are owned by a municipality or by a nonprofit. And in this program, we offer 2 categories of grants. Our pre-development grants are available for planning projects for future work. So things like feasibility studies or historic structure reports. And then our development projects are available for physical preservation or quote unquote bricks and mortar work. Development projects cannot be used for mechanical systems upgrades or maintenance work. And it's mostly for exterior structural work. We can use these for interior work if the interior space is heavily documented and it's really clear what we're going to be bringing back as interior work there. We do also offer funding outside of the MPPF program or outside of the cycle. So if you have emergency needs, structural issues, do contact us because we may have some funding for that. And I will note that both categories of grants do require that a preservation restriction be placed on the building after the work is completed. The pre-development planning preservation restrictions are term limited. They're usually 5 to 10 years, whereas the development ones are in perpetuity. This is state funding, so it's really to protect the state's investment in the property. So like S&P, these are a 50% reimbursable matching grant. So you do have to expend the cost and we reimburse you afterwards. As I said, they are state funding. So you cannot use other state funds to match this grant. CPA funds do not count as state funding though. So you can use CPA funding. That comes in quite a bit. In-kind services, volunteer time, and uncollected pledges cannot be used as a match. However, this is really a cash match grant situation. And then the project cost ranges $5,000 to $30,000 for planning grants, and then $7,500 to $100,000 for actual physical development. And then I mentioned the PR restrictions in the last slide. So here's some of our recent grants. We do award extra points in both S&P and MPPF for folks that are west of Worcester, which is not really relevant for this group, but unfortunately you don't get as many extra points. But we do like to get more of a geographic range. And again, both grant programs are open to nonprofits. So if you have other organizations in your community, especially, churches, local historical societies, folks like that need funding, they should certainly look at the MPPF program. So MPPF's schedule, we have not announced these yet. They're usually announced in December or so. So this was last year's schedule. These are the projects that are really kind of getting started and getting going right now. Again, usually announced in December. We award these at applications are due in March, and then we award the grants at our June commission meeting. Select consultants and contractors over the summer, early fall, and then proceed with the work through the following June 30th. And for MPPF, because it is more physical work and there can be, a lot of changes and things like that, we do want to see that you have the match in hand when you apply for these grants. So that's it for me. Again, as Lindsay said, the slides will go around, so my contact information is here. If you do have any questions about either of the grant programs, as I said, always reach out to us sooner rather than later if you are thinking about pursuing one of these grants. Thanks all.
Thank you, Jen. That was excellent. Next up, we have Elizabeth from State Archives.
Hi. All right. My name is Elizabeth O'Connell. I am the digital archivist here at the Massachusetts Archives. I also serve on the board of the State Historical Records Advisory Board. So I'm going to give you a brief overview about our board and our programs, and then I'm going to spend some time in particular talking about the Veterans Heritage Grant, as it is currently accepting applicants. So the State Historical Records Advisory Board, we provide leadership, advocacy, and guidance to help ensure the identification, preservation, and access to the Commonwealth's public and private historical records. We operate under the provision of federal regulations to serve as the state level review board for proposals submitted to the National Historical Publications and Records Commission, which is NHPRC, who provide funding for SHRAB via their state board programming grant. We also serve as the Archives Advisory Commission for the Commonwealth, and our board members are appointed by the Secretary of the Commonwealth and the Governor. So we have quite a few programs to assist local organizations with their records and archives, including the Roving Archivist and Strategic Assessment. This is sort of our gateway program. A lot of programs, you need to complete this step first before you can participate in them. We also occasionally have re-grants, which is when we provide funding to you. We have the Archival Field Fellowships. We have peer-to-peer mentoring events, and then the board also facilitates the Veterans Heritage Grant. Unlike the other programs, the Veterans Heritage Grant is not funded by NHPRC. It is instead funded by the the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. And so it's basically a little bit different. It does not require a visit from any sort of roving archivist, and it is not limited just to archives or records. The Roving Archivist or Strategic Assessment. This is sort of the premier program sponsored by SHRAB. We employ 2 roving archivists who will perform site visits and then craft reports that are geared towards your institution specifically. We assist not just archives, but also local history places, libraries, occasionally town clerks, things like that. Basically, if you have historical records, we can assist you. We will be accepting new applicants for the Roving Archivist program in November. And if you go to our website, you can learn a little bit more about them. Our re-grants. So through our funding from the NHPRC, we provide grants for the purchase of supplies and materials needed to arrange, describe, preserve, and popularize archival collections. We offer re-grants of up to $500 for the purchase of archival supplies, such as acid-free boxes, interleaving, archival folders, etc. You must first have a visit from a roving archivist, and you must provide a 25% match for these. We are not currently taking applicants for the re-grants program, but we are anticipating opening them up early next year. The Archival Field Fellowship is another very popular program. This is a program that seeks to match institutions with new emergent professionals in the field. It allows for these institutions to have a collection process that they might not otherwise be able to get processed, and it provides experience to new archivists. So typically it should be a smallish collection that takes about 60 hours to complete. And the requirements for host institutions, you must be able to have the 25% match of the $500 re-grant, because as a host institution, you are automatically approved for a re-grant for supplies for the collection being processed. You must have received a strategic assessment and program review through our roving archivist program. You need to basically make sure you have some basic policies already put in place so that the archival field fellow can follow them. And generally speaking, you need a computer. We aren't taking applicants at this time. We just settled on our applicants, but they do open every year in the fall, typically September. We also provide peer-to-peer mentoring events, which seek to connect similar institutions with each other. These events take place over one day at a host institution that has had particular success after their strategic assessment. These typically are a tour, breakfast, and a chance to sort of talk with other attendees. We do provide re-grants through this program as well, and the events occur once a year in spring. Now the big one, the Veterans Heritage Grant. This is for this year, we can provide grants of up to $20,000 from single institutions. We can match up to 50% of the total project costs, obviously, provided that your total project cost does not exceed $20,000. We do require cost sharing. Your financial contributions can include direct and indirect expenses, third-party contributions, and in-kind contributions, including volunteer time. And then I have listed the current rate for volunteer time in Massachusetts, which is $40.97 per hour. Work completed prior to the grant award is ineligible. This is for new projects, not old projects. You do not need to apply for the full amount. We will consider projects of any amount. So if your project is smaller than 20,000, it will still be considered. Typically, the types of projects we like to see, they can vary. We do allow for construction type projects. For a construction project, you will need an assessor's map or legally reported plot plans, surveys, and photographs. We also require a project notification form from the Massachusetts Historical Commission. So if you're planning on any sort of construction project, even if it's just something like repair of a monument, typically we need to see that PNF. We have an application which is linked on this, but you can also find it at the SHRAB's website. Typically, we like to see under 1,000 words for the project proposal. We need a budget narrative, which describes how the funds will be used. We need a letter of commitment documenting and indicating all necessary approvals and permissions to complete the proposed project have been obtained. We like to see letters of support from the community and researchers. And then letters of commitment for matching funds and in-kind services if applicable. You may attach other supporting documents, but this should not exceed 5 pages. We get a lot of these every year, and we do have to go through them in a fairly short time. Some projects that have been funded in the past include projects to record oral history from veterans, projects related to repair of damaged monuments, projects related to creating new park spaces, projects related to preservation of old uniforms, projects related to digitization of records. That's a one we love to fund. We do not fund general upkeep and maintenance of sites. We do not fund flagpoles. And we don't generally fund the surveys. So those are some things that we don't fund. We also do not fund operating expenses for organizations. And then just to give you our timeline on the Veterans Heritage Grant. We are not requiring a letter of intent this year. We have decided to instead replace that with allowing institutions to submit drafts to us if they would like. The draft deadline is November 4th. And feedback will be given to you within 2 weeks of receipt of that draft. The application deadline this year is December 8th. We plan to review them December 11th, and notification to recipients will go out by December 30th. Funds can begin to be dispersed in January of 2025. This year, the Commonwealth has approved a total of $200,000 in funding. So there's a lot of money up for grabs. So we hope to see some interesting projects. I noticed that some people said they are looking to do things for the 250th anniversary of the Revolution. So certainly projects related to that can be funded if it has to do with the soldiers of the Revolution.
Thank you for that. Always love learning more about SHRAB. I've actually been part of 2 organizations that had the roving archivist program and everything.
It's a fantastic program.
It really is. It was incredibly helpful too. And just really, really easy to work with. I think it was Sarah Jane Poindexter.
Sarah Jane is amazing. Yes.
Yeah. So, okay. So up next is Eleni Veritimos from MassDevelopment. And then after she shares one program, she'll be turning it over to her colleague, Geetha.
All right, great. Good morning, everyone. As Lindsay said, Eleni Veritimos, I am serving as the Senior Vice President for Community Investments. I'm also the Director of Division Operations for our Community Development Division. The program I'm going to speak about today, the Underutilized Properties Program, also known as UPP, is managed by Dottie Fulginiti. Unfortunately, Dottie could not be here today. She's in Kansas City at the National Build Small Conference. But I'm going to talk about it, and then my colleague Geetha Ramani, who's our Vice President of Business Development, is going to talk about some other resources that we have available for folks. So hopefully my screen is actually sharing. I feel like when you have 3 screens going on, you never really know what you're looking at. So if something goes wrong, just let me know. But the Underutilized Properties program is one of our newer programs at MassDevelopment. It was authorized by the 2021 Economic Development Bill. And really the program focus is to, as it says on the slide, improve, rehabilitate abandoned, vacant, and underutilized properties. And there's a real public purpose that underlies it, which is to eliminate blight, increase housing production, support economic development or community development projects, but also critically increase the number of commercial buildings that are accessible to people and persons with disabilities. And so as you're thinking or maybe thinking about a project, I think it's always really helpful to keep those priorities in mind. I know that we'll be sharing the slides, but there's additional information on our website if you do want to go and take a peek at that after. The most important things about the Underutilized Properties program are some of these eligibility requirements. Eligible communities, I think it might read a little awkwardly, but essentially any project that's located in any municipality in the Commonwealth is eligible, unlike some of our other programs, which may be limited to gateway cities or certain other restrictions. This is open to all communities. There's a lead applicant that needs to submit the application, which is through the One Stop for Growth process, which I think many of you are familiar with, and notifications for various programs I know have just gone out in the past week, so it might be in the forefront of everyone's mind. So it is on a cyclical basis. It's not on a rolling basis. And I think that's important to know as people are thinking about planning for their projects. But the lead applicant through the One Stop for Growth can be a municipality, a municipal agency or authority, so like a housing authority, an EDIC, a nonprofit entity, a for-profit entity. So really, it kind of runs the gamut of who's eligible to apply for this. It's pretty much everyone except for an individual. We do have a maximum award of $1 million, but they range somewhere in the several. I'd probably say most of our awards are in the $300,000 to $500,000 range. This year, our allocation was about $18 million on average. Since the program has been around, it's been about $17 million. So we do have a significant amount of money to give away. However, we all know that construction projects continue to increase in cost. And so $17 million doesn't go as far as we'd like it to go, given construction inflation. I'll talk about it a little bit more about the two types of grant uses, which is pre-construction and construction, in a couple slides from now. But I do want to highlight two things in that grant use category that are really important to know. One is that new construction is not eligible. So this truly is for underutilized properties. And we do have a number of people that come to us with new construction, or they're adding an addition to an existing building. None of that would be eligible. So this is really to transform existing buildings. And the other thing is that the work has to be within the building's envelope. So if you're looking to do site preparation or other early work, I would encourage you to check out our site readiness program, which is also available through the One Stop for Growth, and can also be found on the MassDevelopment webpage. But this was really limited to building envelope work. We do give priority to projects that can commence within about 3 months of award. And the reason for that is we really don't want this money to be banked for future projects. We want it to essentially hit the street pretty quickly. And so as we eventually, and you'll see in additional slides, as we start evaluating criteria, we're looking for things that are pretty far into the pipeline, and not early stage projects. And I think the other big thing I'd like to highlight on this slide is that these are grants. And so you might say, well, why does that matter? Depending who your applicant is, the receiving the funds as a grant may have tax implications for them. And I do think that's important to point out, because if you're a for-profit entity and you receive money as a grant, you may have a tax implication. We do have the ability to provide these as loans, but not at this time, because our funding source is from the capital budget, not the operating budget. So we do get a lot of requests about whether it could be a loan or a forgivable loan, but at this time we can't, unfortunately, provide that as an option. Program uses. So as I said, there are two types of grants that can be given through the UPP program. The first one is pre-development. So essentially no hard asset or physical work. This is for early stage work that I think all of you are familiar with, typical pre-development work. Indoor surveys like hazardous material surveys, code compliance studies, structural engineering studies, all the kind of things that you would typically see in pre-engineering, pre-development work. And to clarify, you may not apply for two categories. You must either pick pre-development in a particular round or construction in a particular round. Now, construction, as you can see here, is exactly what you think it would be. It's actual physical work on the building itself. And that can vary. It could be building stabilization. It could be improvements to an HVAC system. It could be plumbing repair. It could be roofing systems. It could be, depending on what the building's end use is, it could include tenant improvement and fit out expenses. And I do want to point out, as noted in pre-construction, we can do above ground interior hazardous material removal. We get a lot of questions about that, whether asbestos removal or PCBs, in old lighting systems are eligible, and they are. And then the other sort of a piece of this would be compliance with building code, like fire safety, seismic code work that comes up. So that would be all the things you would imagine, could be, all those systems. It also includes elevators. A lot of people ask us about elevators because that is A, an accessibility requirement, and B, oftentimes something that's holding off unlocking a building from going to its highest and best use because the upper floors can't be utilized. Sprinkler systems and other accessibility improvements like ramps and other things. So a ramp or an exterior kind of piece of ADA requirements is considered building envelope. So if you are thinking of applying for ADA requirements, feel free to call Dottie and make sure that what you're talking about and thinking about is eligible. Let's see. Application evaluation. So one of the things we really look for when reviewing these applications are the things outlined in this slide. And I'm just going to pull out a couple of them in particular that folks ask me about a lot. One is, as I mentioned already, this capacity and readiness. So we're looking for this 3-month start. So can you start some of that work quickly? And we know that both from the information you'll provide about your timeline, but also applicants have to provide their scopes of work. So they need to come in and say, you know, I'm doing plumbing, here's my plumbing scope of work. I'm doing electrical, here's my electrical scope of work. So we'll be able to assess that capacity pretty quickly. Committed capital is really important. So does the project have its funding sources finalized? So essentially, can the project get to completion, both in this phase, but also the overall picture of the project? So we have folks that come to us and let's say they're doing an entire building rehab, and they're doing it in a phased approach. So phase 1 might be doing some of these life, fire, and safety improvements, and then they're going to finish the build out. We want a sense that not only can they finish this phase, but they are able to complete the project in its entirety, because we really don't want to fund something that then might be stuck for a year or two as someone is still lining up the rest of their financial stack. Financial need. So this is also really important for folks to note. We are trying to really hone in on projects that cannot move forward or self-support through traditional funding mechanisms. So is there a gap in their capital stack? And is this but for? So without this money, would the project not move forward? And that really means that that we will look at the numbers. We know that a lot of these projects don't cash flow without a little bit of state subsidy or public subsidy in some way. And so we're looking for that. And it's important for us to see. And then that last piece is this public purpose and benefit. So, you know, we're really looking for a project that activates or reactivates an underutilized property, something that's not at its best and highest use. And that could also have these spill-on effects, which is creating commercial space, retail space, accessibility to folks with disabilities, job creation, tax revenue. So we're looking at it at a pretty holistic approach as to what the project's impact on the community itself is going to be. So we do a public benefit evaluation because this is through, you know, funded through the Commonwealth and is required as part of our enabling language. One of the things I think you'll all understand and appreciate, which is we're looking for some consistency with city and town plans and goals. And we do say specific references are helpful. So what I mean by that is that it's great for someone to say, my project is in the historic district that was created in 1995 and is a priority in our most recent master plan. So really showing us that this is a priority of the community, something that is that folks have been working to activate and advance. We do have folks that come with us with interesting projects, but they're just like, oh, it would be great if this could happen. It's not their number one priority. And I think it's important when folks are applying to really emphasize this. A couple more things on the public benefit evaluation I want to call out, which is that private investment. How much money is being leveraged? And so we look at, are we the only person that they're looking for funding for? Have they secured some private capital? It could be from a bank. It could be money from Mass Historic. Where are they getting this money from? So if we're putting in that $500,000 of but-for money, how much can get done? So it might be able to unlock the entire $23 million project, for example. So we take a look at that. We also want to know, does this increase a property's assessed value? So that obviously gives a great benefit to the municipality. So is this work either putting something back on the tax rolls or again, increasing its property value? And last thing, as I sort of mentioned earlier, is this other category down the bottom. I guess it's a bit of a catch-all, but it's really about spillover benefits to the neighborhood. Is the project or the activities that are going to occur in that newly utilized building going to have benefits for the neighborhood? Some examples that are here are vocational training, improve access to healthy food. It could be just community arts space. It could be something, but is it just really going to activate that building, but also the community? Sometimes I think you all know we talk about these hinge buildings, right? If we could just do that, it would really cause some great activation and investment in an area. And that's what we're looking for too, as we think about these projects. The last thing to think about is, as I mentioned, this is available through the One Stop for Growth process, which means it's not a rolling basis. This is very initial timeline, so I encourage everyone to keep checking back, but we're anticipating that expressions of interest for projects, which I think many of you may be familiar with, that time period might be open the end of December through March. So folks have an opportunity to submit an expression of interest through the One Stop, get some feedback. I also encourage folks during that time to reach out to our business development people like Geetha or Dottie, our program manager, to talk about your project and see if it's a good fit. And if not, maybe there's another program that might be a better fit. The full application usually opens in May, so it's online before that, but you can't actually submit your application until May. So you can start looking and pulling together your materials, start looking at what questions you may need to specifically answer. I always encourage that for folks. Application closes around June. There's a review and evaluation period, and then our board approves them, and then notifications happen between September and October. And as I mentioned just about last week, I think notifications went out. Before I turn it over to Geetha, and I'm happy to answer questions at the very end, I know, as I just also want to note to folks that our Cultural Facilities Fund, which some of you are familiar with, does have a round open right now. Our round 17 opened last week, and it is open through, I think, the second week of December. So as you're thinking about ways to fund projects, please take a look at that. We do have program manager Lillian Munoz who handles that, but that is a program we do in partnership with Mass Cultural Council. Some of you know Jay Paget and Miranda Cook, and they're great resources to touch base with if you are interested in the Cultural Facilities Program. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague Geetha, who will tell me when she would like for me to advance the slides on her behalf.
Thank you, Eleni. Thank you for the invitation to be here to share with you all in the brief minutes we have all of the other programs that we have at MassDevelopment. But I'll keep it very brief in that UPP is definitely the hallmark, a very well-designed kind of rich program that can help unlock and provide you the investment that you need for many of your projects. But in addition to that, MassDevelopment has in its toolkit a number of other grants, but also lending programs that we can use for your project. Just starting off with the grant program, I want to jump down to the third bullet point here. The Brownfields Redevelopment Fund is a program that provides both low interest loans as well as some grant programs where the grants are earmarked for nonprofits to help address contaminants in the soil. We can provide funding to help assess whether there's contaminants in the soil and we can also provide funding to help remediate that. So we have two different kind of sub-programs under the Brownfields Redevelopment Fund. David Bancroft runs that program for us. He sits up in the North region, and so he'd be happy to field any questions on that. But that is always a good program to consider at the very start of your program to resolve any issues that might be all there that needs to be addressed. Then we can turn to all of our other programs, which are generally our lending, our guarantee program, and our tax-exempt bonds. Our lending and our guarantee programs can always be tapped to supplement the funding that might be needed to complete a project. We generally tend to provide loans or guarantees in partnership with another funder that might be in the program, and that can be coordinated with the other funding that you might be bringing in through other tax credits or other grant programs, and then other debt financing that you might have in place. But we can certainly provide funding through loans where the terms would be either comparable or lower than conventional bank rates right now. And then our guarantee program can help developers tap into a higher lending limit from their traditional commercial bank partner. So the guarantee program could be something that could play a role in some of these projects. The third tool is the tax-exempt bond, and I just want to spend a minute on this program because this can be helpful for nonprofits that are looking at building renovation. If you could advance to the next slide. The tax-exempt bond financing program is another tool that MassDevelopment offers, where we serve as a conduit bond issuer, where we can provide a bond for a project. A bank would step in and purchase that bond, and the funding would be provided to the client. This is only a program eligible for certain types of clients, where nonprofits are one of those types. The other programs, the other clients we can offer this for is certain types of affordable housing and certain types of manufacturers. But as nonprofits in the space of potentially preserving a building, if you're finding that your financing needs are increasing above $1 million, and even if you're pulling in grants from other resources, potentially a bond financing tool could be also worked into your financing approach to your project. So that's just something I wanted to present, and it's something, if it can be of use, then we're happy to have further conversations on kind of how the mechanism works. There's a lot of levels to it, so I don't want to get into it right now, but suffice it to say that between our lending programs and our bond financing programs, there are some other tools that MassDevelopment can present to meet your financing needs. And then the last comment I'll make, in addition to the CFF grant that Eleni mentioned, there's also some other programs under the One Stop. Our collaborative co-work grant program has been used in certain cases with other historical buildings in the past that have tapped into our UPP program. So there's so co-work can provide also a source of grant financing as well if it fits the eligibility criteria. But I'm going to stop there, and we'll be happy to answer any questions at the end of the presentation. The slides that you'll get, you'll have all of her contact information. You can reach out directly to Dottie for any UPP specific questions, or you can reach out to any of us on the business development team to field any other questions on UPP or any of the other programs that we have. Thank you.
Thank you for that. That was excellent. Really appreciated learning about that stuff. Now on to Norman and Gloria, last but certainly not least.
Thanks, Lindsay. Let me go ahead and share my screen. So again, as Lindsay said, my name's Gloria Hongpu. I'm on the community engagement team here at MAPC, and I'm also the coordinator for our technical assistance program. And I'll let Norman jump in and introduce himself as well before we dive in.
Hi, everybody, Norman Abbott, Senior Government Affairs Associate at MAPC.
Great. So yeah, we're here to talk about the Technical Assistance Program, which includes funding through DLTA, which I'll talk about, as well as GAP, which Norman will talk about. But starting with the high-level overview of what our Technical Assistance Program is, really it's an opportunity with flexible funding for us to share our staff's time and expertise with the cities and towns across the MAPC region. The TAP grant is not a cash grant, but rather, again, allows our staff across these different departments you see on the screen here to work with cities and towns. And in particular, staff like our very own Lindsay Randall and Sarah Scott, who is also on the call, can help with projects that are going to be particularly relevant to this group around historic preservation. In terms of the funding priorities for our TAP program, we're really looking towards using this funding to move forward regional goals. As you all know, MAPC is the regional planning agency for the greater Boston area. So in terms of leveraging that staff time that we can fund through TAP, we're really trying to focus on where we can fill that gap to bridge across municipal boundaries and move forward our regional goals. That might look like implementing local, regional, or state plans and policies, certainly focusing on equity and inclusion-centered projects. Again, advancing our regional long-range plan Metro Common 2050, and again, bringing together cities and towns to address challenges that are faced across the board, and in doing so, benefiting multiple communities. And I just wanted to pause here to share one example of a TAP-funded project that may be of interest to this group and is in fact led by Lindsay again. And it's a project we've funded this past year with the town of Marblehead, as well as Salem, where Marblehead really approached us with an ask to help them bring together their sustainability committee and their historical commission to think about how we can do both historical preservation and move forward sustainability goals. So Lindsay is really helping to bring folks together to have a conversation about where they can make sure within their historic district homeowners are also able to make improvements to allow for clean energy, whether that's updating their windows or heat pumps, etc. And again, in terms of bringing together multiple cities and towns, we were able to identify a connection between Marblehead and Salem, who have made some progress in this area and are sharing a lot of their best practices and findings so that we can bring some of these improvements to the region more broadly. So that's just one example of a regional project that is benefiting communities all across the MAPC region and helping them sort of address a shared challenge through the TAP funding. Now to get into a little bit more of the nitty-gritty, as I mentioned, TAP is funded through DLTA, District Local Technical Assistance. This is a line item from the state budget, as well as PMTA, which is our assessment dollars that MAPC collects from cities and towns. But we also always encourage folks applying with TAP projects to think about how we can extend those TAP dollars through other funds, some of which we can help you access, like FAR grants, federal funds that we have access to, working with the MPO, but also, of course, thinking about local funds that municipalities might be able to bring, and state grants that we might be able to apply for. And with that, I will in a moment turn it over to Norman to talk about those state grants a little bit more. But just wanted to end this section with how to submit a project to TAP. Our call for proposals is open at the moment as of last week. And we have an initial deadline of December 13th. Apologies, that's a typo, December 13th, 2024, not 2025. And that is an initial deadline, but it is a rolling application, so you're welcome to apply after that date as well. That December 13th deadline is really just when the most funding will be available, so that your application can be considered when we have the most funding and capacity. But in terms of steps to submit a TAP proposal, again, a reminder that TAP funds MAPC staff time. It does not provide a cash grant, but as a result, the applicant must be a municipality within the MAPC region. If you are not part of a municipality, you can reach out to folks and work together. We do welcome partners that are not municipal entities to join in on applications and in fact find those stronger. A letter of support is required from the municipal CEO, and you will find the application material on our website, which I think there is a link to later on, and I can drop in the chat as well. But in the meantime, I will turn it over to Norman to talk about how we can help you all with applying to state and federal grants as well.
Thanks, Gloria. So GAP, or the Grant Assistance Program, is kind of the stepsister to the TAP program, and in ways can be sort of supplemental. It's an opportunity for municipalities who often do not have as much capacity to take on onerous federal grants and now state grants too, to benefit from some of MAPC's capacity. Similar to TAP, it allows for us to work, pays for staff time, not necessarily, funding or direct outlays for any grants. And it's available to all the cities and towns in our region. Next slide, please. So it's used in a variety of different ways. One of the biggest that I'll highlight in a second that we just got was a $21.6 million grant to expand Blue Bikes, which worked with a bunch of different communities in the region. GAP was used to pay for staff time that worked on those applications, and also to bring in a bunch of different stakeholders as well. One of the things that is probably known by some about some of these federal applications is that for the most part, they're more competitive when you regionalize them as opposed to being one municipality on their own going out and trying to get a grant. GAP can kind of act in the way that a lot of other states have county governments coming to sort of bring applicants together. GAP can be used that way. It's also been helped to use to develop our climate action plan, which is the PCAP, and has been used as well to do some interesting work around the direct pay. So I'll get into a little bit more about what's been done on the next slide. So basically, as you can see here, it's a wide range of work. One here is the direct pay webinar that we had in the middle, which is a new it's a new tax incentive through the Inflation Reduction Act that basically allows municipalities to get funding back for energy efficient and clean energy infrastructure that they may be investing in. Obviously, municipalities are not super familiar with filing taxes because they've not had to do so in the past in order to get those rebates. So that webinar walks them through a little bit of how that works, and I'm happy to share that in the chat in a second. It also brings together a bunch of communities to look at our housing issues and our transportation issues as well. What I would say about this is that it's a little bit more flexible than the TAP program, because it's a little bit newer, and it sort of revolves around the availability of federal funding initially, but now can even be used for things like regionalization and efficiency grants, or other grants that folks may want to apply for at the state level. And if you're interested in going after this, interested in making the most of some of the gap funding that we have to offer, I would suggest sending an email to either Gloria or myself, and we'd be happy to chat with you about the opportunities. Again, this is really geared more towards municipalities, although we have partnered with nonprofits and even private companies to advance some of these grants. Usually will need to be either an RPA like MAPC or a municipality who is the primary applicant on those federal grants. State grants can be sometimes are different, but the federal grants primarily it needs to be those entities. And with that, happy to conclude our presentation.
Thank you for that. So if you guys have any questions, you can put them in the chat and, just mark which of the speakers you would like to ask anything of. I did put some MAPC links that I knew I had access to around the Marblehead project that Gloria talked about. That's clean energy guidelines for a local historic district and their regulations. The Stoneham Historic Preservation Plan, which Sarah led and I worked on. That was a MHC survey and planning grant that was, we augmented it a little bit with some of our TAP funding to help with that and everything. And then I also put Gloria Norman's emails in the side. And all of these links that people have been talking about and sharing and everything will also be sent in a follow-up email after this to everyone who registered. So again, if you guys have any questions about anything that was said or any other funding things that you might know about, this is your opportunity. So give everyone a moment. Or maybe our speakers did such a wonderful job, which they did, and no one has any questions. And the other thing too is I know sometimes in these webinars, you're like, oh, I feel like I have a ton of questions, but I don't actually know what question I have. We'll be sending, again, in the follow-up email, everyone's contact information. It'll also be on the EMHCC landing page with links so you can contact everyone who spoke today. So that if you come up with any questions that they can answer that for you or direct you to who best can answer that for you. Okay, well, it doesn't appear we have any questions. So again, if you come up with anything in the interim, please reach out. We can answer it. And for everyone who joined us today, I just want to say thank you for all the work that you do in supporting the historic preservation and the history and heritage work in all of our communities, and recognizing that you are volunteers, most of you, the majority of you, and really just giving of your time and yourselves in this space. And so really just want to share how appreciative we are of you and for being in community with us today. So thank you and have a lovely rest of your Tuesday.